Okay, hi. My name is Becky Jacob. I'm currently a data scientist at a company called Sprout Social, which is right around the corner. Very convenient. So how I ended up where I am today is, like she said, a very twisted story. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas, and I think I did like a website camp as a kid, but I have no memory of it. I think cats were involved. I don't know. It was like not like my moment into tech. Like I definitely did it, forgot it, moved on, did not do anything else with computers for a long time. I went to school at DePaul University in New Orleans, and the counselor was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, I don't know, I'm 18. So they said, get a business degree, which is not bad advice to defend them. So I went to the business school, and I always kind of liked math, but also wasn't like super great at it. So I kind of like stuck with the minor in math for a little while along with my business degree until Calc 3 was at 8 a.m. And then I dropped that immediately, which was a decision that you make when you're 18. So I ended up graduating with a degree in marketing, even though I thought I was going to go with accounting or finance based on my math interest. But right towards the end of my junior year, I took this market research class that had just like a little bit of coding in it. And I was like, oh, this is cool. But also this school is so expensive. I'm not going to stay here for 4 more years. So I ended up just taking every stats class that Tulane offered, and I put on my resume, this is a lie, that I have a concentration in statistics, because that's not a real thing that Tulane says, but it worked. And I did take a lot of stats classes, so So then I graduated with my degree in marketing and this fake concentration in statistics, and I actually did AmeriCorps for a year. This is just a plug for AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps is incredible, and everyone should do it. That has nothing to do with tech, but it's a great experience. So I did that for a year. And so since that's only a year commitment, I was kind of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, because I was like, what is marketing? I don't think I want to do that. I don't know what it is. I just did not get a good major, basically. And I stumbled upon this term data science, which sounded like a little bit of coding and a little bit of stats, and then also still talking to humans, which is obviously something that I really like to do. So I was like, oh, this seems like a cool thing, but it was like new, and I didn't have obviously any of the skills that I needed to do it, which was incredibly intimidating. So as I was finishing up my year at AmeriCorps, I just started looking for marketing research roles that were really more like analyst-based, so like more of a math component to it. I thought I'll just like slowly start transitioning, and in like 20 years, I'll be in the career I want to be in. And this company, who knows why, in Jacksonville, Florida, hired me to be the role was data scientist. I was not doing what we now consider data science, but it was basically an analyst role. So I did that for a year and a half. It was mainly like A/B testing for companies like Verizon was our big partner, so A/B testing on their website. So it was really stats heavy, but everything we were doing was like Excel and like macros. And then on the side, I was like, I'm going to learn to code, but instead I would watch Netflix. So in the end, this is turning into a long story, sorry. In the end, I decided that I was going to have to go to grad school because I'm not self-disciplined enough to teach myself, unfortunately. So I, realizing that I really wanted to pursue this, quit that job and then moved to Chicago. I went to DePaul, here we are, and got my master's in data science here. And then I got my job at Sprout Social while I was still in grad school here through another alumni who also works there. So networking is great. Anyways, a long twisted story. And so now here I am doing data science with a marketing degree.
Nice.
So Jody?
All right. Yeah. Okay. My story might be just as long. I'm Jody Hills. I am the Vice President of Business Strategy at Senior Lifestyle. Senior Lifestyle is a senior living management firm. So, we operate about 180 different buildings across 30 states. And my role is really overseeing all of our enterprise level technology and the sort of data and analytics that go with it. So I work with a lot of databases, integrations, our CRM, like electronic health records, EMAR, kind of getting into that accounting system, budgeting. But how I got here kind of started in high school when I love math and I was very good at it, and a teacher once told me, you should be an actuary. And I was like, I don't know what that word is, but I'm going to trust you. So I was 18, I wanted to be an actuary, I applied for college. I also applied for the military because I had no way to afford college. And I was going to do a year of college and then join the military. Well, what turned out is I'm a horrible college student at 18. I partied the entire time, and I think I left with a 1.4 in my first semester of school.
Nice.
So I went to the military a lot sooner. And that's where I really learned discipline. And I was with the military actively for about 2 years. Came back, did another semester of school, then I got deployed. And I'm still thinking I want to be an actuary. But I come home from this deployment, and all I know is I don't want to spend another 4 years trying to learn this area of study and take all of these tests. When, I'm 22, everybody I went to high school with is already graduating. So I looked at the classes I had taken, the ones I had passed, and I said, you know what, an accounting degree could come around in about 2 years. So I got a degree in accounting. And while I was getting my degree, I applied for internships, as many of us do, and I was between 2 firms, and I ended up going to a small consulting firm as sort of a bookkeeper. And this consulting firm specialized in Oracle Hyperion Essbase. It's an OLAP technology. And I did very well in the back office because I understood all of the technology they were using. They were like, man, you're good with tech. And I'm like, well, I am young. So I actually ended up becoming a consultant with the company and left the accounting path. I did 6 months of bookkeeping, and that is my accounting story. So while I was with this company and I was designing OLAP databases, essentially, cubes, I also took a career path in predictive analytics at DePaul. And I have progressed my career at Senior Lifestyle. So I consulted for a while. I found this company, this client of ours, that I just loved their culture. And I loved their idea of technology and what they wanted to invest in and how they wanted to grow their firm. That I was like, I can't say no. I'm going to be working for a boss that I admire that is going to entrust me to build this for him. And after about 1.5 years of just consulting with them, I came on board. I've been there about 4.5 years now since then. And I've grown this lovely department. And it really all started with a kick in the ass and basic training, kind of making me disciplined. So, yeah, that's my story.
And Jody, your predictive analytics is data science today, right, at DePaul?
It is data science today. So I was, phase 1.
So Danny?
My path is going to diverge a little bit here. I currently work at Google as an account representative on Search Ads 360, which is the tech stack piece of online advertising at Google. And I'm also a doctoral student in HR. So no tech education yet. But going back to high school, similarly, I started a business my junior year of high school, helping small businesses in my hometown market themselves. And as I was starting the business, at the same time, I did whatever you would call the high school version of an internship with a politician, also in my hometown. And then I went to college. I went to Albion College in Michigan, entered college as a pre-law student. Went through 1 year of pre-law, 1.5 years of pre-law, all the while running this marketing business and doing marketing internships. Quickly realized that while I was passionate about law, I didn't love it enough to do it as a career. So senior year of undergrad, I switched to a marketing degree, didn't have enough credits to graduate on time, so instead leveraged Albion's program to design your own major and designed essentially an integrated marketing degree that could tap into the law courses that I had already taken. Graduated from Albion and went to Whirlpool Corporation, the appliance company, and spent 1 year working in brand management on their laundry business. I am the person that puts all of my laundry in the washer, runs it cold in a single cycle, and I was convincing sophisticated consumers that they needed 32 cycle options on their machine. It was a great match. Thoroughly enjoyed Whirlpool, but at the same time finished a master's degree in HR, and at the same time was still running this business. I got really brave after 1 year at Whirlpool, quit my job, took my brand new master's, and took this marketing business full time. Spent 2 years traveling the globe, speaking at conferences on entrepreneurship, and teaching female entrepreneurs how to not underprice themselves. If you are a creative female entrepreneur, you stereotypically speaking underprice yourself by about 46% to what a man running the same business charges. And creative entrepreneurs are very protective of their pricing, so there's no way to understand what the market price is in your city. So spent 2 years shattering those norms. And then Google came knocking and told me that I had sales skills. And in my first interview, I laughed and I said, I'm not a salesperson. In fact, I'm super passionate about law, but am doing marketing. And the interviewer said, well, if you're not a salesperson, how have you been paying your bills for the past 3 years? Okay, I concede that perhaps I have some sales skills. Got a job at Google working with small businesses, helping them essentially fix their ad strategy. And then moved back to Chicago, took this job that I have now, and started my doctorate 4 weeks ago. And that's the journey. Nowhere in there do I have any formal tech education.
So, Danielle.
So I guess I don't know, it's still different in here. I'm Danielle Jones. I'm actually the lead software development researcher over at ZS Associates. We're a pharmaceutical software consulting firm. I actually run research for in-house software. I got here when I was an undergrad at DePaul. So I'm a double demon here. Yay, I have all my money now. And I came in as a psychology major because I liked teaching and I wanted to kind of have a fallback degree. I was actually also one of the first people in my family to go to college. So it's like, no pressure, don't fuck up. And so I had to kind of keep that going, and I did it, and I went to school, and I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I'm not quite sure about this, but I'm gonna go teach because everybody in my family teaches. And they're like, okay, we can do this. And so I started off at a Montessori school teaching special education reading and math. And also, yeah, that sucked. Like, I love teaching, but I don't like kids. So I found out that this was a problem. And I realized I also still loved tech. And I was one of those people. I am a lot older than I look. So I ended up playing back in the day with the GeoCities pages when they came out. And I was like coding everything back there. Yeah, you had those styles on MySpace. Yup, that was me. Kind of playing around with that. And I was completely self-taught because I was a psychology degree. And I actually, for those of you who are in Chicago, I actually started working at Empire Home Services, the 588-2300. Yeah, yep. How many times did I get that jingle saying to me when I came home? But I was training for them, and I was like, well, it's tech, and I'm actually training people how to use this software. This is kind of cool, but I still hadn't decided anything. And then I decided to come back to DePaul for a open house because a friend wanted to go and visit the CDM, this was CDM at the time, for computer graphics and animation. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna sit here and do it. And they offered me a pen. And I was like, well, I guess I have a pen. I can go to grad school now. And so I enrolled into the HCI program at DePaul and decided to do doing UX in that sense. But I really didn't have as much passion as I thought I did at first. And development was my passion. So I kept trying to do that. And I was working on that on the side. And any kind of group project, I was like, I'm going to do the development work. You guys can go talk to people. I'm good. I'll just sit here on my computer and play. And so I did that, and then I kind of leveraged that up to leave the Montessori school I was at and start working at an agency. I was working at a design kitchen in Chicago, and I was developing sites. I was working for Oprah. I was working for Motorola. I was we did Burger King, all these kinds of fun products and activities. I was working on dev. I was doing dev. I was doing QA. I was doing requirements, and then the whole market and just died out. And so I had to make a choice at that point of what do you do as a 28-year-old with a mortgage and a kid and a family. How do you go ahead and survive again? And I had to rebrand myself and actually take all of that knowledge that I got from this debt and go into UX. So I'm pretty much a 30-year-old intern at this point, trying to work and go into UX and leveraging myself to do all of these skills. And I worked as UX designers, and I went to agencies and did work for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. We went ahead and worked for a couple other, Walgreens, the bane of every UX person's existence around here. Allstate, all of these different companies, and started working around to kind of keep up in the UX research division, and finally decided that I don't want to design anymore. I want to research. So I have kind of been building that up as a long roundabout way ever since, and now I am pretty much here doing UX development. I stopped teaching web development about a few years ago, but I'm still teaching over here at DePaul and teaching UX research and UX design skills now. So I think I got every question, but I think that's about it. So.
But I think the common element of all these stories is there isn't a straight path here. and I think that's very inspiring in all these stories. But and maybe the other common element is you're all looking for your passion. I mean, that's a word that's being repeated and repeated. What excites you? What makes you passionate? So I think very inspirational as people are looking out for their own careers. And something to put in the back of your mind, if it's not working out, you can always do something else.
Yeah.
So with that, let's look at what myths about women in tech or about tech in general that you would love to bust. And if Jody's ready, maybe I'll start in the middle.
So I might not be out there in the world enough to know really what the myths are or what the common sayings are, but something that I've experienced in the tech world is that there seems to be a misconception of, the technology you're using is designed by other users. And the real reality, what I've seen, is the person designing the technology may not be the person who actually ends up having to use it. And then that brings this opportunity for people who can come in and speak both worlds, who can understand really what is the business function, what is the need, what does the user want out of this, and how do I translate that for my developer to really bring into reality. And so that's what I see as a common myth for people who don't really work in tech. They're like, oh yeah, the guys who design it, they got to be using it. I'm like, no.
So I'm gonna piggyback on you because that's my whole industry.
Yeah, it is.
HCI program, love us all. But that is the thing. We don't who's using this software, and we have to get to know it. Our whole discipline in UX is trying to understand what users do and how to bring that knowledge to the people that develop those tools. It's a hard fight. We're not new, but we're seen as new. And so we kind of have to go from there. I don't know. I think for me though, because I came up in a developer-centric world, I was the only woman on the team in the development space. And I was also the only Black woman on a development team. Betty talked earlier, and we had a person about diversity in a company. They're like, we're diverse. And I'm like, dude, it's me and the receptionist. You are not diverse. And it's this whole thing that you don't matter. Your voice doesn't matter. You don't know what you're doing. Oh my God, you're so emotional. I'm like, fuck you, dude. I'm sorry. I apologize in advance. But those are things that I always get told. You don't know what these people want. And I'm like, no, I don't. And I have to ask them about it. So it's just one of those weird things.
I think for me, the misconception was that you needed to understand math, science, or technology. In undergrad, applying to Google would have never crossed my radar. I didn't take a single math or science class in undergrad or in grad school. I truly haven't taken a math or science class since my junior year of high school. I can't do long division. Multiplication in my head is not a thing. So I just assumed that I was precluded from anything tech related because I am so creative, right brain? Is that the right side? I'm so creative and I don't have analytical skills. And don't get me wrong, I literally just got my performance rating last week, and analytical skills is the one thing that I consistently get dinged on. But I've been successful in tech without math, without science, and without true data-rooted analytical skills. And I wish I would have known that 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I would say that is 100% true.
Yeah.
I have a team that works for me. So my data analyst actually had her career start at a car dealership. And then she, moved to Chicago and she just worked a front office desk. And she was like, I don't know if I would be a good fit for your team. I'm like, no, you'd be great because data analysis is about data visualization and I think you can make things look good. So don't worry, you'll learn everything on the way. And she's great. Like, she is self-taught SQL and she's amazing at it. And so you don't have to come from these traditional backgrounds to succeed. You just really need to believe in yourself or have someone else give you that confidence.
I think that's the bigger point, that you have to, know that you can do it, but also, like, even if you aren't trained in it, prove that you can. Like, taught, but we can show people that we have these skills, and it's not going to always come from a straight path or a straight background like you have.
I think we just, I don't know, I'm guilty of this all the time, but just even like referring to tech as its like own little thing, like obviously it is, but yeah, the reality is it's like it's an industry, right? So all companies need salespeople, marketing people, HR, like there are so many roles, right? It's just a normal company. It's just that the product happens to be a technological thing, right? That like makes it tech. So I feel like people are often, including myself, like, oh, well, like add a tech company. Well, no, it's like any company, right? Like, I don't know, my old company wasn't a tech company and like men were still weird to me. Like, it's not like a tech-specific problem, like, right? Anyone who is in any sort of minority identity has like experienced these things in their personal life, in their business life. It's not a tech-specific problem. I would argue that maybe like when we're talking about, like women in tech issues, it's really more like women in STEM, right? It's really across a broad spectrum of things. My sister is a mechanical engineer. She would not tell you she works for a tech company. She builds giant wind turbines, but like, yeah, her whole team is, like, it's definitely more of like a STEM thing. Not to say that women who aren't in STEM, who are in tech, still have the problems of all people. But I just think the biggest myth about tech is that it's like this separate entity. It's like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of these things happen kind of anywhere you go, whether you're working in tech or not. And the only reason maybe it has this spin on it is because tech, especially in the beginning, was like this like utopian thing, right? Like, oh, go work for Google and everyone's gonna get a free car, and like that's wonderful, but it kind of like made people think that somehow it was gonna avoid all of these problems that just exist at any company or any aspect of your life. And it's just a company that maybe you get free lunch at, which is also great.
And I think that this comment starts to address the question you had about skills and what skills are important, because you really heard an entire, basket full of different skills. Shireen, which is over here, was mentioning to me I didn't say anything about communications in my talk, which was really due to a lack of time. It was literally the last thing I cut. But what I think you're hearing here is communications, be it visualization is communications, UX, communicating with your users, translating. So, I promise you get your question answered by the panel, and I think they really hit onto that. And I think one other comment I'm going to make in response to what was said too is, pretty much any profession, but I'd say tech particularly, things change very quickly. So even if you're on a very straight path, the path is going to change under you. And here's the proof of success that you can get on different paths. You can jog and be successful and hopefully enjoy it on the way. Monica set up the system so people could provide questions going into this, and there was a question that came in that said, in the world of leadership, there seems to be a double standard for men and women with the term bossy. What are the ways you overcome the stereotype of a woman in leadership being bossy? Danny, start?
So you can't tell, but I'm a Latina woman, which comes not only with the bossy stereotype, but the loud, the emotional, all of those stereotypes too. So I get called bossy or loud or obnoxious on a daily basis. But for me, successfully navigating that has all been in presentation. To combat the bossy perspective, I speak authoritatively, but collaboratively. Like, I end my statements with invitations to discuss, not invitations to question or contradict. So bossy is going to happen, and bossy is not going away, even with lean in, even with like boss like a girl. So rather than avoid bossy, for me it's been lean into and pivot.
I'd kind of go with the same. Like, I'm Black and also Puerto Rican, so I get both of them just right back at you. And I'm just like, every time I come in, I'm just like, well, look, this is what it is. This is how I see it. This is the information behind it, and I always make sure I stand behind facts. If I'm going to go ahead and talk, and I know I'm going to be questioned, you better believe I'm going to have the facts and data to go ahead and back it up. And then I can go ahead and cite, and I also use and leverage my team effectively. If I see that they have an idea, I'm not going to go ahead and push it. I'm going to push them instead to get that and then raise their voice a little bit more. I have people, we always get the standard of people going ahead and saying, oh, the younger person will say it or the junior person will say something and they avoid them. And then I'll go ahead and repeat it. And I'm like, no, she just said this and you were talking about this earlier. She said this and we should go ahead and listen. So I'll use my bossy for good. And I will try to raise those issues, and they know it. And also, but I also make sure that my team knows that they can use it too. So if they're scared to have an issue, they will come to me and say, "Can you raise this?" And I'm like, well, we might get scared, we might get dinged. I'm like, I don't give a care. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So what's the worst that they're gonna tell me? No. And so I lean into it too.
Yeah. I don't really have a great experience with the term bossy, almost because it's not language that I've heard at my company to describe anybody. I would definitely be described as demanding and decisive, but those are traits that are almost valued. So I think it depends on the verbiage you choose for your actions and how you present yourself, and that your company chooses really kind of changes how people are viewing it. So my company is very female heavy in leadership roles. It is a very strong company, and that may, also lean to this, right? But if you're demanding and you're decisive, people like that because they're like, I can count on you as a leader to make a decision, to stick by your decision, to understand if you made an error and to correct. And that's what they want. And so that's how it's perceived in my culture and my company.
I think some of it comes down, like, honest industry, company, like the makeup of your team, like all of these things are huge factors. I'm really fortunate my company is very, or attempting to be very progressive. So I have heard people call other people out in meetings if someone's like, oh, well, that's like a little too much or something. And they're like, well, would you say that to a man? And they'll just say it in the meeting, which is like incredible that like we work at a company that allows for that. And I realize that a lot of people are not in situations like that. I also can be, I guess, they're bossy. I can get into it. I have strong opinions. And from my experience, people who fall into that category don't really have a problem being called boss. Like, yeah, go ahead, call me. Like, it's, like if I'm coming off that way, it's because I'm like the type of person who maybe it's just gonna like roll off my back. But if you're not that type of person, I think it can be really helpful. I know I've worked with people before who maybe come across as shyer, but then can still be pretty direct in meetings, and so they have like heard feedback on that in their reviews and stuff, and they have to kind of be proactive to like get usually other women, but allies of any type, to back them up in those scenarios, right? And like I've had coworkers come to me and say, I'm getting feedback in my reviews that I'm too direct, that I'm too bossy, that I'm too whatever the word might be. Do you feel I'm that way? And I'm like, no. And they're like, would you mind submitting feedback to my boss, like to back up, right? To like filter in, get some other people in there, some other opinions to kind of try to like level the playing field, so that if it is just one person, that becomes less of an issue. But I feel like it's so company specific. And
yeah, I think we hear some really good ways of demonstrating the take charge leadership components, like being authoritative but collaborative, and trying to soften that. But I tell you, Danielle, I'm going to be use my bossy for good from here on. That's great. I have more questions here, but I'd really like to open it up to anyone who'd like to ask our panel questions.
Oh, I do. I thought this was going to probably happen at the end because I just find a number of points that you've made to be incredible. So one, it's interesting. Sorry, your name. Becky.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you talked about when the question came up about tech, right? And I think you make a great point that somehow we have fashioned tech to become computer related and only computer related as technology. But tech, even if you start from the Industrial Revolution, right? I don't know, where there are things that's truly technology, innovation, technology. I think, as Grace pointed out, my boots. Thank you, Grace. But that's a technology that was created. So when I think about, again, I just thought that your point bringing out that technology is not just exclusively what we're seeing on the web, but that technology is in any place, and that every woman has a place and can have a place in technology if they choose to do that. And so I don't know if anybody else has a thought about that in terms of the panelists, that technology is broad, like Danielle, you're like, I haven't coded, even when I think about myself, I am a non-techie, but always in a techie world, and I forbid to code. When I take my coding class, I am not looking for a 0 or a 1 or a comma or nothing, but I am in, all of my projects I've ever met are technology related. So I just didn't know if anybody had any other thoughts on that, because I just thought it was just a great point that we don't want to limit ourselves, but expand ourselves in the concept of technology.
Well, I think we also have to look at it, to Becky's point earlier, that any regular quote-unquote non-tech company is still tech. There's still tech that has to run behind it. Like, we're consulting, yes, we're software, but I worked for the car dealerships. I worked and did the back office finance paperwork. That's not, that's still tech, but you can find tech at like Jewel. Like, it's just, It doesn't matter where it is. It's not an industry. It's not always a big tech firm.
Looking at it as languages and not programming languages is another good thing to do. When you go to France and you want to assimilate to French culture, you try and use French language. Regardless of the company you go to, they have a language, they have a culture that you have to assimilate to. And so just learning that can remove the pressure that the perception of tech gives. I had to do that coming to Google. I work with people who are Top Gun fighter pilots and Nobel Peace Prize winners and so much more scientifically advanced than I am, but learning the language helps me have conversations that are still impactful.
I guess if I can add one word for our sponsor too, I think DePaul does a really nice job. We're sitting in CDM here, but throughout, the many liberal arts programs that are going on and really starting to integrate tech to reinforce that. I know there's a faculty member looking at exposing liberal arts majors to the Internet of Things, because no matter what you're studying, you're going to be impacted by technology helping you analyze, collect data, understand, disseminate what you're doing. Okay. Do you have a question?
Oh, yes. So I'd like to redefine the question that I asked earlier, because after listening to you all's, bios, I see that I have a lot in common. So I also have a psych degree with a concentration in mindfulness, and I don't necessarily want to spend more money to go to grad school, but also use more discipline. So what's like a program or coding experience that I could be more self-taught in, that I don't necessarily have to go back to school for?
I guess I gotta push this back to you. Are you disciplined and self-taught?
Yeah.
I can be. And that, I forgot the last point. So yeah, I'm not necessarily in love enough with tech to want to go to school for it and whatnot. But I do, I have always wanted to at least learn one coding or programming language, just to say that I could do it.
So go to Lynda. Go to lynda.com. Go to Code Academy. Go to Pluralsight. All of these different kinds of online tools to pick a language that you like Because there's some, I will shoot myself if I have to go ahead and do like C#. It's just not going to happen. Sorry if you love it, because that's you. But
it is a hard language. I use it for games, and it is a language to learn.
But pick what you want.
I think you have to have a use case. So it's really hard for me, not being traditionally disciplined, it's really hard for me to learn something that can't directly apply to something I'm doing now. So I can't just be like, I want to learn Portuguese today. No, like that doesn't work. So what I would recommend is finding a way that you can use technology to improve what you're doing today and find what that technology is. So a really good plug for like up and coming tech that is real easy to learn, there's free community editions in the world, is RPA development, so robotic process automation. UiPath, Automation Anywhere has community editions, they're free, you can download them. And like a way that you can sort of use this is you create basically like a screenshot and like a flow chart of activities. So you could have your personal computer, you could create a bot that could go into your email and pull all your statements that you want and just like put it in a collective like Excel document for you. Like something that you think would be useful, like, oh, how can I better balance my budget? Let me just create this little robot that I can, now I have this new skill that's doing a benefit for me. Or that, I would recommend that because it's an awesome tool. It really is, and there's a lot of personal use case for it. But most of the use cases I find when I learn stuff are through my business. I'm like, oh, I should learn this to improve this process.
I would, double down on this. I was trying to teach myself Python before I decided I had to go back to grad school because I'm not self-disciplined. And it was just not going really anywhere because Netflix. I mean, like, what else am I going to do when I go home? It's right there. So I ended up going to grad school, which I'm not saying you need to do at all. Definitely, if you go the self-taught route, that is like the way to do it. Save yourself some money, except go to DePaul. Because, but other than that, but I am pretty into fantasy football, and I'm in several leagues, and I spent a lot of time on that, and I ended up like automating, like building myself a little web scraper that would like help me set my lineups every week. So picking something that you're passionate about, right? Because like just learning it for the sake of learning it can be really hard unless maybe that's your jam. But picking something that you're interested in that you already do regularly, it could be literally anything, scrolling through Tumblr or whatever, and then trying to automate it through whatever language, hopefully an easier one like not C, is a great way to self-motivate, is finding a way that it will help you in your day-to-day life.
I wanted to say, I believe that you have access to Linda through DePaul. Trust me, it's folded into your tuition. And second of all, this brings us to what do you mean by coding? I mean, I used to write Lotus macros once upon a time. I also wrote machine language because it was all we could do in 1969. And I don't know any of the modern languages. And I taught debase and access coding at some level, but I'm a little confused. I mean, what you're talking about as coding is, oh yeah, I've done that. Can't remember most of it. Or is it, learning C++?
Yeah. So I think that depends on the business that you join. Because I don't work in a traditional tech industry, or I work in senior housing.
Yeah.
We need technology to run, and we need to advance our technology. But my team is not traditionally tech. What I teach them is how to read code, and we use batch scripting and Python and SQL for our querying languages. I teach them how to read it, how to maintain it. So if something changes, where do they modify to make it better? And then from there, if we want to do enhancements, we have a base to go off of. They're not creating net new. And because they're not creating net new, it's a lot easier for them to digest the information. And they're still walking away with a decent amount of skill set because they can read the language. They can have this 1,000+ word script and be like, oh, I know what this is doing. I know what areas I can manipulate to get it to do something else. And that's sort of the coding that we do in, like, we're not building software out of scratch. That's kind of the level that we need.
Less coding focused, but still tech language focused is in the sales and business space, understanding formulas,
Oh,
understanding how to run Salesforce.
Oh, God,
Like, I can't code, but my knowledge of like Excel and Google Sheet formulas has gotten much better.
Learn a
And,
VLOOKUP.
Yeah, that's a
VLOOKUP,
skill that
honestly.
you can leverage
Yeah.
without having to learn
Life-changing.
a whole language.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned, what did you mention when you were saying that she should try
Oh,
something?
RPA?
RPA?
Yeah.
Right.
You guys familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with it, but I think it's an important point, and the only reason why I say that is because, one, there is the future of AI, right? It's coming, and it's not gonna, you're not gonna avoid it. Deloitte has already predicted that in 25 years, there's gonna be an amount of AI. So if anything, I'd be going down that track, get ahead of it, so that you're ahead of what's coming. But when I think about what you just mentioned about how you can take your everyday thoughts, your everyday problems, and create like a bot or something simple, that is what people need. And I think you were talking about the UX, the user experience, right? The user's experience, not the developer's experience. And we have everyday problems that we're trying to solve, and we solve it with technology. Doesn't need to be complex technology, but it does need to be solved. And so if you have the mind of psychology, mindfulness, everyday problems that you're uncovering, something like I think what you're mentioning would be phenomenal to start learning. Not the necessary coding behind it, but the understanding of why this is a problem and how do you solve it, and how do you use simple technology to solve it. I think that would be a great experience, so I just need to write it down so I can look it up.
I also want to kind of point back out to there. Who said that you have to take quote unquote tech as a skill? Like I said, I don't go ahead and do that anymore, but I use all of those same soft skills that you have in psychology, the research, the talk, the conversation, the dialogue, and I use that to drive technology all day. So don't always think that you have to go ahead and, Danny, you just said the same thing. Like you use what you already have to do something that you want. So if that's the direction that you're going and that you like, figure out how do you want to apply that to where you want to go.
I said that because like a lot of the positions that I would apply for in just basic like research analysts, they want like Python or HTML or SQL and all that type of stuff.
Check
But
What
Different
stage do they
positions.
say they want it? Do they say it like on the job description or
Yeah.
in the conversation?
on the job description.
Yeah, that's their ideal world. That doesn't, I've written several job descriptions. It's like, yeah, tell them every technology we use. You know, if they hit one of them, I'm happy. But if they don't hit any of them, I'll teach them. Like, don't let that be a barrier to applying.
Take some Coursera courses, then put on your resume that you have a concentration in HTML. Apply for that job.
Just be a quick learner. You're great.
But that's one of the big differences with the imposter syndrome too, that men will apply for jobs. Men will see, the list of 10 things and say, I've got 4 of them, I may as well throw my hat into the ring. Women will see a list of 10 things, say, I have 9 of them, I better get a master's degree in the 10th. and if you apply and if you say, I don't have all of these, you don't lie, maybe you don't put on your resume.
Maybe don't lie.
Or maybe use a different word, but just put in that you're interested in this job because you think you can do A, B, C, and D. One of the real challenges for any of you getting jobs is most of these resumes get read by some kind of machine reading beforehand. So it's going to be looking for a lot of keywords before you even get to a human being.
So I'm gonna kind of pour Becky's thing right there with the way that you can get around that a little bit is the word familiar.
Yeah.
Familiar with
Have you seen a
X,
script?
Y, and Z language. I have seen it. I have been introduced to it. I know what it is. And that can kind of at least get you out of that automated hump a little bit, because it's really just scanning for that keyword on your resume. But yeah, you just gotta go ahead
And because most jobs, I feel like, so you got to get past the resume thing, which I agree. Read the paragraph about it on Wikipedia, put it on your resume, and then you're going to do that first HR call,
Yep.
right? Which I think will be become very apparent where maybe they won't even bring it up in the call because they don't actually, it's not actually a requirement. They just wanted to like kind of throw it out there in hopes that they would get somebody. Or 2 seconds into the call, they're like, do you know HTML, CSS, blah, blah, blah. And then you know what? You tried anyways, like it's fine, move on. But it will get you over the hump of getting to that first call where you find out if it even is like a real requirement. Now, granted, if they're like, we want 25 years of Python.
In a junior role, it's probably not a requirement. It's probably just this is what you're going to be doing when you're here. Not necessarily, we need you to come in the door with this experience.
So it just seems like companies don't necessarily want to train as much, and like they expect
don't.
your undergraduate degree to have given you those skills, but they also discount having just a bachelor's degree. So it's kind of like you need the job to get more skills, but you need more skills to even get the job. So I just don't really know how to balance.
Position yourself. Like they're saying, you have to position yourself, and you'll get it. But you need to position. It's like marketing.
I was gonna say
That's
this is
it.
all sales and marketing.
What do you want to do?
This is again going back to the men versus women thing. I took a course recently with someone educating on how to be a cruise ship speaker, and I came to the session prepared with the talks that I thought I would give on cruise ships. And he says, okay, here's the list of 50 possible topics that cruise ships are interested in. And he's like, I speak on 27 of them. And I took a step back and I was like, how is this guy sophisticatedly educated in 27 of these 50 topics in order to, he's not. He hiked Half Dome once and now he's a public speaker on rock climbing on cruise ships. But you can, it's all about the positioning of soft skills, experiences, anecdotal stories that you can weave into resume bullet points that can get you past the scanners.
And I just saw a very recent LinkedIn article talking about a shift in the trend of companies training employees and actually sort of leaning more into doing that than buying pre-existing, pre-packaged skills. So that may be an HR flip, but was a trending thing in HR on LinkedIn.
Microsoft's doing that.
The other thing I did, we're recording this, right? So all my companies are going to know this. It's fine. The other thing that I did on my resume, when I was still in school, I don't know how many of you all are, but and I was applying. So I just started the grad program here in data science. Had never coded before. It was in Python 101. Barely could open my computer, right? And but you had to apply early for internships for that summer. So I was applying for these internships, which were expecting me to know Python fully, along with a lot of other algorithms that I hadn't even heard the names of yet. So I put on my resume all of the skills that were listed in the classes I was going to have completed by the end of the time, right? Because realistically, that's what my teacher is saying I'm going to learn. That's what the skills I will have by the time I get there. I don't have them maybe right now, but I very much intend to, and I'm also not going to try to screw over a company or something, right? I very much intended to have all of these skills by the time I got there, and I got through a couple interviews or whatever, and I got in there, and they started asking me questions about some of the stuff I hadn't covered yet, and I was just honest. I just said that the reality is I'm 2 weeks into this course on big data Hadoop, right? I can tell you the first 2 weeks worth of criteria, but by the time this starts in a month and a half, these are the things that I expect to know. These are the things that my program already have. So it's all about positioning yourself. Where you know you'll be, or if you know that you'll be capable of doing it, I think it's okay to fudge the details a little bit to get yourself in the door, because men are doing it.
So maybe continuing with this, one of the things we had considered as a topic was, what do you wish you knew when you were in college or starting your career that you know now? And I think it kind of builds well from these. What would you tell your former self?
I'm gonna let somebody else go first.
I would tell my former self how average everybody is. And really, where I go with that is, when I was joining the military, I was like, oh, I got to get in really good shape because everybody's going to be like G.I. Jane. And I'm there, and it's not. It's just a bunch of average people. They collect them out of anywhere. We're all normal, right? And then I go into the business world. I'm like, oh, I need to know these things. I need to be up to date on these topics. And I get there. I'm like, nope, don't really need that either. It's just a bunch of me's, a bunch of normal people that are just kind of going about their day to day. They're working it too. So you don't have to be the top of everything. You don't have to excel at everything to be good at your next opportunity. You just have to show up. You show up and you try, you're just as good as everybody else.
Parallel to that, I think failure is mandatory.
Oh, yeah.
In an interview for my job at Google, I told the story of getting fired from a previous job and why that was a good thing. That may be acceptable for Google and not other places, but I say that to share that we are so good at talking about our successes and positioning ourselves as winners who have never failed a day in their lives. But some of the biggest lessons I've learned are from my failures. The first year of being a full-time entrepreneur, I paid myself $12,000. And that is a story that I now can tell of how I lived an entire 365 days on $12,000. It taught me empathy. It gave me a reality check that I didn't need a Birkin. But failure becomes those anecdotes that make you more human, and so don't be so afraid to expose that. Like, exposing your failures and your weaknesses is not a bad thing.
I think for me, I would actually say that it's okay to be me. And when I was starting out, I thought that I had to be this, like, super soft-spoken person. I had to, like, kind of agree, and I was going in there, and, I wasn't gonna be listened to. And then I realized that it's boring, and it's also not that, can I call it, like, the person that you date is like the representative when you first start, and then you actually get that person.
Yeah.
Like, I was like trying to be the representative, like, for the whole time, and then you just get mad and you're like, who is this person? Like, no, it was me, and I would rather show you who I am now, and then make you comfortable and let you know what you're getting, and trust that that's okay, as opposed to trying to fit in here because I think that's what you want from me. So it's just, it is what it is, and people are going to value it or they're not.
It's exhausting pretending to be someone else every day.
It is, and you hate it.
And then it's very awkward when you suddenly become yourself.
Yes.
A year in, you're like, just kidding. I think, I just lost it. What were you just saying?
Don't
be yourself.
Yeah, be yourself.
Okay, yes. Similarly to this. Thank you. Just a moment there. I still have so many friends who get really nervous before interviews. That's fine. Interviews are terrifying. It's like someone who's literally judging you to your face. But they're like so concerned, like, I don't know, should I wear like this blazer, or should I wear a suit, or should I, like, all of these like really sort of minute things, which I do think end up playing a part in whether you get the job or not. But for me, the reality is, like, be yourself in the interview. Like, don't be rude and don't be weird. Like, I don't know, don't like swear at the person or something. But like, the reality is like, if you, like, just don't want to work at a place where I have to wear a suit. That's just like not me, right? Like, I'm not interested. So if I go into an interview and I'm not wearing a suit and that's why I didn't get the job, I shouldn't have gotten the job. Like, I shouldn't have ended up at that company, right? If I go into an interview and I'm too casual, I'm not professional enough, perfect. That wasn't going to be a good fit for me anyways. Obviously, to an extent, because if you're like never getting a job because you're wearing pajamas to your interview, like there's a point to all of this. There's a scale. But yeah, be yourself early on. I feel like there's this pressure of like you have to be offered every job you apply for, and like that's insane. No, because probably a lot of those jobs wouldn't have ended up being good jobs anyways, and then you're in this situation where you're in this job you hate. It's like so much better to figure that out super early on than to get in and then have to apply again in the whole process.
I mean, I'm purple haired and like red rope chucks and everything else. My boss to this day says, I have no idea what you would look like with one color hair. And like, we're all like tatted and everything else, and it's okay. Yes, I still run ahead and go, and I still go to Fortune 100 companies, and I still talk to them just as plainly as if somebody else would. I'm not gonna let like how I feel or how I express or how I look go ahead and stop me from doing what I want to do. It's my confidence that's gonna sell it. It's my skills that are gonna sell it. It's my knowledge, and I don't let what I look like or how you perceive me change that. And I think we kind of forget that too.
Also, and then I'll give it back to you, Professor. Take up the space that you take up. As a fat, queer, Latina woman, there's nothing worse than getting on an airplane and the person next to you slamming down their armrest and suddenly your thigh is half crushed, and you shrink, you hold your arms in, you scoot really close together, you get off the flight with thigh cramps from trying to hold your thighs together. Being at work and not taking up the space that is who you are gives you, over time, those same cramps, but in the perspective of your work, in the way that you communicate with your coworkers, in the way that you actually perform. So in so much as be yourself, also take up the space that you are. Don't soften your voice. Don't hold back your personality. There's a line between professionalism and unprofessional. Like, toe that line, but within that line, like, take up the space of who you are.
This, I think, is great discussion. One of the challenges that often happens with a panel is you bring successful women up in front of a group, and you get the image that, you know, these magic executive eggs hatched one day and a perfect executive popped out. And in reality, what you see are successful women say it's okay to be yourself. I've had challenges. I've had difficulties in my journey. I do get thigh cramps to be who I am. But the value of authenticity is just, you know, so evident here. And I do want to make one comment on interviewing as you go into interviews, because the comment was, you know, casually said, you're being judged. And don't take it as you're being judged, as someone who has done a zillion interviews. And you are, the interviewer is looking for a match between a position and a person. And it's not a reflection on you or your capabilities or your skills. It's a match that means the company is getting what it needs, and they think you'll get what you need, because it doesn't do a lot of good to have somebody join and quit 6 months later either. So you're still being nervous and everything, but don't take it as being judged. Take it as really an evaluation of how someone will do in a job. Okay, got a question pop right up.
Well, I just wondered if any of you have experienced a time in your careers where you kind of had to take things entrepreneurially, you had to start your own company in order to sort of make a sideways move to get to where you wanted to go. Because I know that for myself, I've sometimes had to do that, and it's generally worked. So I wondered if you could speak to that.
Everyone wants to just listen to you. So I quit working at Whirlpool, and I took this thing that I had been side hustling on for 6 years at that point and turned it into a full-time job. And I don't think the struggle is quitting the job and being an entrepreneur. I think the struggle is being an entrepreneur and positioning that successfully to re-enter the workforce. That's where most folks have the issue. And positioning is everything. But evaluate everything that you've done during that entrepreneurial time from a data perspective. I realize the least data-centric person is saying that. But I quantified my successes and my failures to make that pivot successful. I talked about how I pitched X million dollars worth of business, but only closed Y%. My delta between the two was still greater than the average conversion rate in my industry, which speaks to some sort of sales ability, right? So it's not so much the doing the entrepreneurial thing, it's selling it when you come back that you have to be really mindful of.
Other questions from the group? So I have one that, okay, go ahead.
Okay. I feel ashamed to ask this. There's this one love perspective of supporting women, but sometimes not all women are good or competent at their jobs. Mm-hmm. So how do you blend the two?
Which answer do you want?
Please don't tell me to mentor. I don't want to mentor everyone.
Because some people are just crappy people. And there's ways to go about it. I'm sorry, if you're affecting my job, I don't care about your feelings. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you. Yeah. I'm going to, but there's a way to do it. You don't go ahead and just like you suck. But yes, here's what it is. Here's the problem. Here's where you're affecting me. Here's where you're affecting yourself. And here's some suggestions you can do to fix it. Now, if they don't take it, you have options. You can either escalate it up, or you can go ahead, you can escalate it up, you can help them, or you can go out. That's pretty much all you got, at least for me.
Yeah. So there's two types of bad employee. There's like people who aren't really doing the work, and then there's what I consider gossipers who are just stirring shit up that they don't need to be. And I don't tolerate that one. So if there's like a gossiper and they're on my team and they're just stirring shit, they're gone pretty soon. Like we have a hard conversation about it in the beginning, and then if they continue, they're gone. But if it's somebody who maybe they're not on your team, maybe they're not somebody you have that sort of control in that relationship with, where you could mentor or train or figure out like a pip to put them on, then you just kind of have to understand what is making their job difficult, that's causing them to be crabby or insufficient or unproductive. And I try to build efficiencies for them, because that's my department, is creating efficiencies. So if I can give them something to make their day, the relationship tends to get a little bit better. And then if I can avoid them altogether, I do that as well. Because I'm not in a position to control their work.
It's all about equality, right? It's not about like we should just have companies that are filled with women who can't do the job that they were hired for, like because they're women. Like I don't think that's anyone's like end goal here. We want everyone to be happy. I feel like whenever someone I'm working with who is any sort of, I don't know, minority identity does something and I'm like, that's annoying or bad or whatever, I feel like it's important that you take the step back to be like, if this other coworker who's a male white cis dude or whatever it might be did that same thing, would I be having the same reaction? Right? And if the answer is yes, then fantastic. Like I just think it's important to acknowledge whatever your privileges and like your perspective on the situation is, like take a step back and really like make sure that there's not something else that's coming into it subconsciously that's like making this more of a problem than it really is, just based on that person. And then guess what? They suck. Like that, like it is what it is, you know? Like as long as you take the step to make sure you're not doing those things, some people just like aren't fit for roles or aren't meant for the culture of a company.
I also consider my personal brand equity and my current career status when making those moves. If I'm about to be promoted and I've knocked shit out of the park and it's a done deal, I will deal with it for another month to get over that and then address it. If I've recently been promoted, I might be bolder about addressing it. If I've recently spent a lot of my personal brand capital getting something else approved that I needed approved, I'll hold on it. But if I've been holding my brand equity for a while and I have some excess to spend, I'll spend it on trying to solve the situation. Like all of these pieces included into that, but I'm also very mindful of what my intervention will do for my growth and development, and is it worth the potential loss that could result.
You know, when you have an individual that can be toxic or challenging, you're not the only person that's experiencing it too.
So be equal, but be judicious and fair and wise.
Being fair is really important, and sometimes coming from the perspective as a manager, many a time I've said, I'm not asking you to get married, I'm asking you to work together for 3 hours. And so there is a certain amount of, you know, sometimes you have to live with it. But I think there was kind of that balance between being professional and unprofessional. I think there's that balance between someone is just annoying and you don't want to be part of the one love with them. You know, we don't have to be best friends with everybody. We're 50% of the population. We have a lot of different personalities. But if it's unprofessional, if it's inappropriate behavior, you also don't have to tolerate that. Yeah.
So I'm actually in the applied statistics graduate program with a concentration in data science. And so I was actually a little bit hesitant coming here today because I didn't know if I technically qualified as tech because I'm not an engineer. But you have alleviated those concerns for me. My question is, I'm currently working in an unrelated role, and I've been in this role for almost 5 years, and I'm kind of looking to transition into the field of data science and statistics. And so how do you know going into an interview if the company that you're interviewing with is gonna be a good fit for you. Because every other time I've applied for jobs, it has been like, I need money. And I will do whatever you need me to do to pay me money. So this is the first time that I'm really taking into consideration what I wanna be doing and what I will find fulfilling. So do you have any advice in terms of not just like Googling companies and reading their websites and those kinds of things, but how to engage in interviews and what kinds of questions to ask to know if it's gonna be a good fit for you?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Are you talking about if the work will be a good fit or the culture will be a good fit?
Yes.
Both. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I haven't interviewed myself for a job for a while, but I say it goes back to that idea of being yourself straight off in the interview, because what you want to do is when you're actually talking to the hiring manager, you want to see if this is like a vibe that you could work with. Do they seem strong as someone who can mentor you, or do they seem, comfortable, someone you could like look up to, someone you wouldn't mind spending 8 hours a day with? Does it have that sort of impact on you? Do you get that feeling, like those butterflies? And then you want to understand how they value the work you're going to do. So are you just another like cog in the system and it's just, whatever? Or are they really trying to invest in this area and it's a highlight for them, it's important to them? Because if that's the case and that's the field you want to get into, it's going to have a lot more attention. You're going to get more support and you're probably going to feel a lot better about what you're doing than, just being like another Joe.
I think parallel to that, putting on my HR hat for a second, is ask if you can, so if you come in the morning for an in-person interview, ask if you can have a visitor pass to spend the rest of the day working from a common area, if you have that kind of time. Or ask to, if they're a company that either provides food or sells food, ask if you can sit for 3 hours in the cafeteria. Watch what happens. I did this when I came to Google. I went to lunch after my interview and I sat and I watched because I had heard what Google was, but I also understand corporate politics and it might not actually have played out the way I thought it was going to. So by sitting in the cafeteria or working from some kind of common space, work, but also listen and observe. And that's where you'll see the fit come to life as well, because in the interview, they're trying to sell you just as much as you're trying to sell them. And you want a perspective without the sales sheen.
Yeah, I do have a story that's just like that. It's not my personal experience, but it was actually my boss's. So he was interviewing for a Big Four when he was like 22. And he sat in the lobby for just about 30 minutes before his interview to see what were the expressions on the people's faces as they were going into work. And he made his decision right there. He's like, this is not a place for me. Everybody looks miserable. So there is insight into just watching the culture and like just seeing the people, and do they seem to be happy? Do they seem to like their job or excited about going to work on a Monday?
I've actually done that, like just sat in the interview early. Like just go sit in the lobby early and just see how people are as they're going to meetings. Listen to the
Are they
hallway
greeting each other?
conversations. Yeah, are they talking to each other? Are they all sitting down looking at their phone? Are they actually, engaged with each other? Are they shouting match it? Like, because you will see it. Like there are some people that just, don't get along. But just observe and try to figure it out. And also look up people that you know or that are around or can give you those connections. And outside of work, they aren't the ones you're interviewing with. How's this company to work for? What do you know?
Sure.
Kind of do your, not just the Google homework, but the people homework and make those connections. And not only do you have it there, if it goes well, you can use it to your advantage in the interviewing process.
Yeah, very much that. That's basically what I was going to say. When I was looking for jobs, I would find like some companies that I was interested in, and I was on LinkedIn finding third-degree connections, messaging people I went, right, saying like, you don't know me, but I'm just like, do you like your job, right? Like, just do you like your job? Because like you said, Glassdoor, all of these things, like, yeah, you can generally get a feel, but also people lie and things happen and things change and whatever. Yeah, I feel like I used to think like you're kind of like stuck to like whatever HR tells you. Like you have this one HR phone call and then you have this one phone, right? No, absolutely not. honestly, sometimes you can get people's emails. Just guess, like Becky@sproutsocial.com, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can reach out to people at the company. There's nothing, I mean, don't be weird, but like, there's nothing wrong about that. We've had people reach out and say, like, I'd like to get coffee with the team to like get a feel for what the team's culture is. And generally, the company's going to want you to do that because it's more expensive for them to hire you and have you in outfit, right? Like, they want to help you. But maybe they're not going to do that on their own. But there's no reason that you can't ask. Like, I'd like to spend more time with my team, or I'd like to hang around in the lobby, or whatever it might be.
Last piece of advice, look up if the company has ever had a big layoff. And if they've had a big layoff, I don't care if they've had a layoff, businesses change, but read what happened in the layoff. Often news companies will publish the letter the CEO sent, or we'll get some insiders from the company to talk about it, because employees who are getting laid off are now the least invested employees at the company because they're leaving. How did they treat the least common denominator? And that's going to tell you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment in response to you saying feeling welcome here because you're in data science. If there's anything we want to talk about inclusion, is we should not be excluding people by their definition of tech. So not only am I glad that you're feeling welcome, but let's make an effort that anyone who isn't here because they decided they didn't fit our, you have to be 3.79 in the tech scale and they were only 3.72 and didn't join us. Make sure that they're welcome to come again.
Have you used a cell phone? You tech. You're part of the group.
I'm very impressed with the corporate espionage experience we've just heard about. Would you cut that part? But in fact, there is something called ASK, Alumni Sharing Knowledge. It is a formal, funded DePaul program, and a huge percentage of DePaul's alumni, and we got a lot of them, are employed in this area, and they volunteer to share their knowledge, their experience in their careers and their current jobs in companies they work with, work for. And again, it's rolled into your tuition. You might as well use it. So you have a mechanism for just reaching out to DePaul alumni. And much earlier, if you have a course that you're really excited about something, somebody mentions a possible job, start early. Reach out and find somebody who's actually doing that job. Ideally, somebody who's 2 or 3 years out, and find out if there's a mechanism to talk to them, because you will learn so much that way. And then use everything they said besides.
I'll just put Natalia on blast here. There she is waving. She found me on Ask, and we got coffee earlier this week, and I told her about this event, so there you go. And the alumni who are on there, like, voluntarily got on there. So it's not like someone's going to be like, never talk to me. Like, they signed up for it, so they're going to be nice.
They want you.
Yeah, and don't hesitate to ask faculty about alumni too. Because especially if you're going to larger companies that may have a few DePaul alums, or have just people they know through their connections. I don't know if they're still here, but I'll volunteer them, volunteer them all, because they all, you may not, you have a different relationship with your professors, but we have an emeritus prof here. I mean, professors really, really, really care about you guys launching into successful careers. So take advantage of that. Okay, other questions from the group?
So what if you're not a DePaul student right now?
Meetups.
Yeah, same. I'm not a DePaul alum, but wherever you went to school, or if you haven't gone to school, there are public-facing, non-school gatekeeping resources.
Especially, there's a ton of tech meetups in Chicago.
Oh my God, it's insane.
Like I'm trying to think. I'm UXPA. I'm IXD. There's a UXPM groups in Chicago.
Hi, ladies, women in big data. There's so many.
Yep.
I had to unsubscribe from Meetup because it was like
Yeah.
so aggressive because I joined too many when I moved here. But they're free. There's usually free food.
Yep.
And it's filled with people who are, again, opting in to be in a scenario where they're going to talk to people. So it's like a really welcoming environment.
Yep.
or get involved at 1871 if you want a
Yeah.
flavor of
Oh,
like
yeah.
tech entrepreneurship. There are other spaces like that. M-Hub has events too.
General Assembly has
Yep.
a variety
Mhm.
of free things, including a Women in Tech Leadership Breakfast on Friday mornings once a month.
There's
Oh, yeah,
also
I've been to
She Runs It, which is for women working in tech, but they have a student membership for folks who have an interest in working in tech but are still in school.
And remember, when you take advantage of all this, pay it forward.
Yeah.
You'll be able to help the next group of our sisters coming behind us. Well, let me ask if anyone's been offered a position they turned down, and with the hope that they could find something better or different could be attained. This is one of the questions that was sent in.
Yes. Yeah. I think like I said, I started off when I switched over, I got an offer to go in and do development for McDonald's. And I was transitioning from this development space to UX. And I was like, well, this will be great. I can actually, oh my God, I can buy groceries. Like, this is the thing, like right now. But this opportunity, this lower little internship is gonna do so much more for me that I chose that instead. And I left the other one on the table because I had to evaluate what was gonna be better for me in the long run. Screw what everybody else was saying around me about, oh my God, this is so good for you, you should be doing this, because they don't know you, and you know what you're gonna have to deal with and where you're trying to go later. So yes, I will, sometimes you just have to make those decisions.
Pre-Google, like a year before Google happened, so a year and a half into being an entrepreneur, an advertising agency that I had worked with during my time at Whirlpool came knocking and asked if I would want to interview for a job. And I never turned down an interview, so I went to the job interview. And the work was directly in line with what I had been doing at Whirlpool, directly in line with what I was doing in my entrepreneurial work. But I was 5 years post-grad at this point and had entrepreneurial experience going back a decade at that point, and it was an entry-level role. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice the opportunity that was in entrepreneurship for an entry-level role, regardless of how perfect a fit it was and how much I truly would have enjoyed it and loved the people, because I already was friends with half of them. So it's also okay to turn down jobs for money or because you, and back this up with fact, but you believe you're beyond the role, if it's going to like stall something else.
Yep.
Yeah, I know when I was looking for internships, I interviewed at a couple places. I got an opportunity to start at one, and I actually showed up to the first day, the orientation, and then I heard back from another one that I actually wanted more, which is with the consulting firm, because I thought, that's an opportunity where I'm going to be continuously learning versus this other opportunity is static. And so I actually had to make the decision to fall back against an offer and be like, I'm sorry, I know I said I accepted this. I know I signed the offer letter and showed up, but I'm going to have to turn in my keys. Like, it's not going to be a fit. And it's a hard decision to make because you're letting somebody else down, but it was the right decision for me at the time.
When I got my first job after AmeriCorps, when I was applying for my first job after AmeriCorps, so I was still serving AmeriCorps, but like I said, it was a year program, so it was coming to an end, so like needed a job. I applied for this data science, not really, role in Jacksonville, Florida, and I got through to the first HR phone call. And they had a data science role, and then they had another role called research analyst, which really was not an analyst at all. It was kind of like a project manager, to be honest. And during that HR call, they said to me, "We don't really think you're fitted for data science. You're not a technical person. We think you're fitted for this research analyst role," which, don't even get me started on not technical enough. If anyone says that to you, what does that even mean? Like, push back on that till the cows come home. But in their defense, I truly was not technical at that point because I had no experience in the field. And it was terrifying because I really needed this job, but I just pushed back. So I didn't turn down a job, but they were very much like, they could have just said, okay, then we're not interested anymore. And I was like, no, like if it's this job or not, like this is the job that I need for my career to progress my life or whatever. This is the one I'm interested in. And they said, okay, that's fine, and just continue the interview process. I was like sweating bullets on the phone, but yeah, sometimes you just have to, you gotta make a decision that's right for you.
Yeah, and I think there's some great examples here, because there's a pay gap between women and men, and a lot of it is based on bias, but an awful lot of it is based on the fact we don't negotiate. We don't push for the positions that we should have. And maybe a nice UPE follow-up too is some discussions around negotiating for jobs, or without being without putting yourself painted in a corner where you can't get out of the corner, but to make sure that you're appropriately paid, or that if it's too junior, it's not what you're going to go after. So I think great examples.
I think that's a great idea for the organization, a conversation around that. And I know the Harvard Business School is having I think it's a 50-year anniversary of women. And they've been doing quite a bit of research, much of which relates to negotiating skills and approaches for women. So there's material out there that would be probably hot off the presses that you could share.
But can I just say something to that? Because I think that's one of the biggest things nowadays, is that I think that as women specifically, we need to be going for the highest pay and not being concerned and not being afraid to go for the highest pay, because everything is then set on your salary, right? And if you're coming in low, and I don't think it's a bad thing for the employer, right? Because they're trying to, if I can get the best player at the lowest cost, they are doing great business. But women have to come in knowing that they are highly capable and should be asking for top dollar. And I think isn't it in here in Chicago that you can't even look at your past salary, which is a great thing, right? Because then that means that is not on the table, and that you can now go and command a higher salary. And I just think that income is huge, that you need to be going for top dollar. And so research, no, go to the table, and the most that they can say is, no, we cannot pay you that. But if you are not going for the top compensation, you're cutting yourself off. And I think that would make a huge statement in technology that, yes, I'm coming bold to the table, and I command in this space top dollar. So stop playing small when it comes to the money.
If you have male friends who do what you do, ask them what money they make, or ask them what they would ask for if they were applying for your job. And also talk to also women in your industry. Like, there are so many studies that say that, like, if people know what their coworkers make, while I know that can be an uncomfortable conversation to have, everyone is more likely to move up at the same rate.
Yeah.
So like there's specifically someone at my company who's like very pro that and has really organized it well. You could be that person at your company, but like just don't be afraid, and make it nice. Like, you don't have to tell me, but I'm interested in how much money you make. But like, on behalf of equality of everyone moving up, it is like so important that you know what other people, not just according to Glassdoor, but like from them, what they're making and like the percent raises they're getting every year, so that you know that you're on par with everyone else.
Yeah, it's also, when you become a hiring manager, recognize your team's worth in adjusting their salary to market. So a lot of people get hit hard because they come in the door, they're making one salary amount, and then as time goes on, they're just getting little merit increases year over year, and suddenly they're positioned a lot below market, especially in these, tech-driven jobs. So as a hiring manager, you have to take a look at your team's salary, and you have to say, what would I get today if I paid somebody new this same amount? Would I get the skill set that I have on my team? No, you probably get a lot less. Okay, so then take that as an opportunity where you're not necessarily promoting someone because they maybe not be ready for a new role, but you're also saying, I recognize that what you do today for me actually costs more than what I'm paying you, and I want to right size adjust. And that's important, because if you start doing that as a hiring manager, that'll teach your team to do that when they become managers, and it sort of trickles down.
I think to that point, you'll also retain better capital.
because most people leave to get a higher salary.
Because that's the only way you can, it's like, you're doing the same job, just go to a different company, you'll make more.
Yep.
And it's like, well, don't be the company that loses the employee that has all the years of experience in your company. Like, just pay them more. Like, pay them to market.
And hopefully you have a wonderful hiring manager who does this. In the case that you don't, go to another company, get the offer, and bring it back, right? Because they
Do the
don't want, they
research.
won't want to lose you, like probably, like they're gonna want to hold on to you.
They can be disconnected from it too. So, because it takes energy to actually research this. So give them a break and be like, hey, I know I'm worth more. Let's talk about it.
I'd say especially smaller companies.
Yeah.
The big companies, like, here at DePaul, we do market studies continually to make sure that both our faculty and staff are appropriately paid. But if you're a small, just beyond startup company, you're not investing in those kinds of things. But I loved the way Becky put it. Ask your friend, your colleague, what they would ask for. You're not asking their salary. It's like, what would you ask for if you were going for this job? Might give you some courage. Might give you some surprising numbers.
It does. It has happened to me. I was like, how much? Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, sounds great.
Some other hands up? Oh, what? Oh, in the back there.
So right now I'm a current junior here. I'm studying UX design, and right now I'm just like, I've been trying to apply for internships, but it's hard because like most of the qualifications say like you have to know like certain programs, and right now at this point I'm still like mixing gen eds and major courses. So do you have any tips for like Miss Danielle Jones? Do you have any tips on how to like better like look for internships that may match my skills so far?
So there's two things that you can do. One is you can look for companies that you actually admire or people that you know. And a lot of times we have just options where if we really want you, we can try to make a space sometimes and get an intern in. So it depends on how strong your connections are and how many people that you do know. Another one is, again, look and see your coursework and kind of how Becky said, what are the skills that you're going to be learning in these other classes, and then start figuring out like, okay, a lot of companies are asking me for this. Maybe next quarter I need to take this instead. And then start planning a little bit of your school progression around that. Number three at this point, is actually going ahead and picking up on some of those outside skills outside of the classroom and starting to invest in that in your own. And then you can still build your resume up and saying, yes, I'm doing this, I'm also studying this, and keeping those skills together. I don't think there's not going to be a magic bullet answer, unfortunately. I think all of them are going to take a little bit more legwork, but yes, it is still possible to do.
Yes, and because like since UX design is like a broad career field, and there's like research, like what you're doing, user testing and design, I'm still like kind of deciding what I want to focus on. So when I look for internships, like I don't know what specifically they want or what I want. So I'm trying to like search for a specific design internship, because some are like just graphic design, but I just don't want to do graphic design. I want to like actually learn how to design new apps or like suggest ideas, because I like proposing new ideas too.
So I think the big thing is figuring out which one you want, because like for us, we had a research intern because I needed somebody that was going to be dedicated to user research, and then they found an intern that really wanted that, and I needed to see that passion. And honestly, if I got a candidate that was like you, to be blunt, I would say no, because you can't tell me what you want. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to train you, and most times if we're trying to go through, we might be looking for an intern that we can hire. And if I have you and I'm training you in a specialty and that's not what you want, you're going to waste me money. And so I'm not going to hire you. So I need you to come to me and actually say what it is that you want. If you want to go ahead and do UX design and you find a UX design internship and you can prove to me that you're passionate about it, now I have an investment in it. Now I have a reason to train you. So you can't be wishy-washy.
To that point, from an HR perspective, internships are meant to be a net loss to the company. They are supposed to teach you more than the benefit you give them. And so when you're thinking about that, if you find an internship that you check enough boxes, plus have some other unique skill outside of what they're looking for that could give benefit, that's going to be attractive, because you're meant to be a net loss. You're not meant to be this perfect contribution that's going to drive magical success in 3 months. And so be mindful of the fact that offering them an outsized benefit that's not on the list of what they're asking for could even out that loss that they're ready to take in educating you.
If I can add a little bit too, I think if you make a decision that this is where you think you want to go, an internship is a great way to decide it is what you want or it isn't what you want before you're taking your permanent job. You know, none of these career paths were linear. There's no reason that you think you should be able to pick what aspect with 100% certainty at this point. Well, I might like to ask a question of where you might see yourself going if you look a little bit ahead, a handful of years out. I got asked on the whole future of tech. So I think the least you can do is ask where you would be in a few years out.
Tired.
Does anyone like to take that?
Funny enough, as much as I've talked about how I'm not a data person, my next steps is to get into Google comp planning, and to understand the non-mathematical factors about compensation and how we can mathematicize them so that bias can be removed.
Would that be where some of your research is too in your doctorate? Yeah.
I think, so I don't know where I'll be, but I want to go further into more of a public policy space as it relates to assisted living and sort of bringing that industry more into the greater healthcare continuum.
That's cool.
AI. I'm a lot more into the research and the user experience of AI, and how do we bring design when it doesn't have a face. And so kind of pushing those spaces a little bit more and training all those teams to kind of take into account the different profiles and needs of everybody when we can't put it on the screen.
I truly have no idea, but I can, because I have no idea, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, so I can tell you what I'm thinking about. I think my dad worked at IBM for like 40 years in a pretty technical role, and my mom used to always say when we were kids, if your dad had wanted to be a manager, we'd be rich, but your dad would be sad, which is probably true. He just like had no interest in managing people. And I think now, for the most part, it's really wonderful that like companies have acknowledged that people may have a very strong technical skill, and that does not mean that they should manage humans.
Yes.
And that most commonly those skill sets are completely different and don't coexist in the same person. So I think we're in a really great place now where you can continue to advance in your company and continue to make more money and continue to get raises without having to manage people. But the kind of downside of that is, from what I understand, I like my company and a couple other companies my friends work for, at some point there's a decision to be made. Not that you couldn't go back right later in life and change that decision, but that as you get to a certain point of technicality, do you want to double down on that like straight technical path, or are you interested in managing people, and like you still have a technical aspect to your role, but it'll be a lot more people management. So that's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. And then additionally, I think people get different things from their jobs, right? Some people want to make the absolute most money they can. Some people really want to help save the world. Like there's all of these different aspects to your job that are outside of what you do on your day-to-day. And I think for me, going into it, I'm a very social person. I knew that I just like needed to enjoy being around my coworkers. Like that was like my number one thing. But now that I'm working in social media and I have no real interest in social media, like I love what I do and I love my coworkers, but I'm like, what if I could do both of those and also, right? So there's kind of like these different aspects to like play with. So I have no idea, but those are the things I'm thinking about.
I think you're hearing a lot of divergent paths and maybe success on your own terms, very much defining what's success. But the really great platform is that where tech can take you, and where these careers can take you. So just starting from tech and getting involved has almost limitless options. We saw four very different ones. So I think we're pretty much wrapping up. Is there any last word you'd like to leave to our very engaged participants today?
I would make a quick plug. I am involved in the Women in Tech. It's like a business resource group at my company, which is great that my company has that. That's fantastic. But we recently received feedback that was pretty alienating to other genders who are also underrepresented in tech. So we just changed from women in tech to underrepresented genders in tech, and we have several trans men now who have joined us who felt very excluded prior to that. So I think women in tech is great, and I'm not trying to hate on that at all. That's an important area, but it was eye-opening to me, and I think we should all just be inclusive that there are other people who are underrepresented in tech.
So mine's really, a brand slogan, just do it. So if this is what you want, if you think this is the path you want to go down, just put yourself out there. And it works out. It really does. If you want it and you put yourself out there, it works.
If you do nothing else and take nothing else away, understand what your personal brand is. Because your personal brand will be what gets you jobs, what gets you promoted, and what your boss sees, frankly. So just get a really good handle on what that is. And if you don't have a good handle on it, Google personal brand and read. And there are YouTube videos, there are all kinds of resources.
I guess my final one is find out what it is that makes you happy, and then figure out how you can spend that to make money. Because I am happily saying I have been blessed for the last 15 years to always go in every day and do something that I love to do. And I think it might be a different company. I might not love everybody there, but I love the actual work that I have done and the things that I have built and the people that I've worked for. And so I think that's something, the way that you can figure out how you want to translate that and know what you don't like. Yeah. And cause that's going to be a learning experience too.
Okay, well, Danielle, Danny, Jody, Becky, wonderful words of inspiration, advice. Let's thank them for.
Thank her that we are here. Forgot to say that earlier.
And yay for Monica for keeping it alive, because it could have died.
So thank you guys. This was great. This was exactly everything that I hoped we would get out of this. So I appreciate your time getting out of work and being here with us. And thank you guys. This is really great. You guys engaged really well, asked great questions. Really enjoyed having you here. Thank you. And even now as networking, you can now really connect more. Yep.
Say something about networking and just about it's so interesting because there's so many people here, and I don't know if anybody is on LinkedIn, want to be connected to all these amazing people, women I should say, and men on LinkedIn, but there's a feature that you can use if you have the LinkedIn app to start connecting with people. I don't know if that's something that you would be open to allowing that to happen. I'm talking about the nearby feature on LinkedIn.
I guess if everybody's okay.
I don't know, I'm just saying that you don't have to actually connect with people, but it's just a great way that, when I think about this space and all the people, all the women
And it
that are
only
here.
works when it's open.
When
It
it's
works via
open.
Bluetooth, so if you
Yeah.
open your app, it'll work for everybody who's open their app.
So I'm just saying. I don't know. So I just thought I don't know, if people wanted to connect in on LinkedIn, if you do, I'll walk you through it, and the one thing I think about that is that if you want to connect, you connect, and if you don't have to. That's the beauty of it, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, so if anybody has their phone up, I'm getting ready to turn my nearby on and see and invite people to connect, right? So if you have your